We are now doing our presentation on artificial turf. Why is artificial turf a climate issue, and how is it a climate issue? Why should we care about it if we care about climate? Obviously, if you cover the world with plastic carpet, that is not the most intuitively nature-based solution that you could come up with. But there are many reasons involving our health and our safety and our biodiversity that are extremely interwoven in artificial turf. And artificial turf itself is part of our climate crisis, because our climate crisis is also an extinction and biodiversity crisis. This is, as I mentioned, an Al Gore slide himself. So there's no doubt that this is part of our core mission. And we are now at risk at losing 50% of our land-based species in this century. That's a mind-boggling number, and that is something we have to reverse. And it really means that we need to reconsider when we have limited open spaces in our urban environment, covering it with plastic carpet, essentially. All right, here's where it gets silly. I'm going to very quickly give you a brief history of artificial turf and how Sputnik led to AstroTurf. Okay, everybody with me? Couple nods. All right. 1957, Sputnik is launched. The US freaks out. Eisenhower is president. Everybody is saying, oh my gosh, we have to do something about this. We have to, fill this gap with the Soviets because they're way ahead of us in space. And we're all freaking out because this little tiny ball that beeps is going around the planet. Lyndon Johnson is a Democrat, and he is the Senate Majority Leader at that time. Eisenhower is the president, and he's a Republican. And so essentially what happens is, in order to get the Democrats to come on board with what the Republicans wanted to do and Eisenhower wanted to do, which is start a space program and put a lot of money in the budget into that, Johnson, who had been in the Congress since he was like 7 years old or something ridiculous. I mean, his whole life it's been in Congress. He used his position as Senate Majority Leader to get this Houston Space Center in Houston because he was the senator from Texas. At the same time, Major League Baseball is expanding. In 1962, there are 2 teams added to Major League Baseball. One is the New York Mets. The other one is the Houston Colt 45s. Okay, never heard of those guys probably, unless you're a particular baseball fan. Okay, so some people didn't like the fact that they were naming a team after guns and it's, kids, and maybe people were more sensitive to that issue then than they are today. So essentially, after 3 years, you see this green grass field in the foreground. That's opening in 1962, where the Colt 45s play. And they say, wow, it's really hot playing in Houston, Texas. We've never had any teams this far south and in this warm a space. So what's going to be the solution to that? We will build a dome. And that's what this thing is up in the top left hand of the screen. That is the Astrodome. And they decided, since the space program now is based in Houston, they would rename the baseball team the Astros, and they would name this facility the Astrodome. I'm going to get to artificial turf. It's just around the corner. The Astrodome opens in 1965, and it's basically just a big concrete shell. Yet they still decided, oh, don't worry about it. We'll put windows on the top and we can put grass in there and it'll all work out just fine. Well, baseball season starts in March. The grass was all dead by May. And for the rest of that first season in 1965, they literally painted the grass green because they played on dead grass the entire year. So the Houston Astros in their first season were playing on dead grass, and it was just a mess, and it was problematic. So Monsanto comes to the rescue and says, hey guys, we're working on this cool product that we call ChemGrass, and we're going to put that in your stadium for you. It's basically plastic carpet, but it'll look like grass and you can play on it and everything will be cool, and it costs nothing to maintain. It'll all work out and everybody will be happy. And it does look better than painted grass. This is when it opens in 1966 with the AstroTurf, now rebranded and that name in honor of the stadium. So this is how we get the name AstroTurf. This is why it's called AstroTurf. And that's a brand name. Shortly after that, when other companies start introducing their own thing, it becomes artificial turf because they can't use the copyrighted name AstroTurf. And many stadiums across America specifically, and eventually around the world, both in the NCAA and in our major sports, start installing this stuff because they're building domes during the 60s too. The idea is you can play football and baseball and everything in one facility. You can have it warm in the winter. You can have it cooled in the summer. Everybody will love it. Well, it turns out the stuff doesn't hold up nearly as well as they had originally promised. The maintenance costs were a lot more, and I know this is a low-res solution photo, but this is what I had for my silly presentation. It turns out the maintenance costs are actually more expensive than even a grass field. And also at the same time, it turns out people don't like watching sports events in damp caves. They prefer an open stadium where possible. So as quickly as they could get bond issues, a lot of sports teams within 20, 30 years start pushing to rebuild purpose-built baseball stadiums, purpose-built NFL stadiums, purpose-built NCAA stadiums. And they spend a lot of money to do that so they can rebuild them and build grass fields. And the people who had invested a lot of money in an artificial turf industry, they understand that they're in trouble. So they refocus their attentions along around the late 80s, early 90s on selling artificial turf to schools and selling it to homeowners and saying, you know what, we're going to have a lot of water savings because you don't have to water this stuff. It's not grass, just makes sense, right? So you can save a lot of time and effort and a lot of costs on grass. And, saving water is particularly important in the desert Southwest. But heat is a real factor in saving water. And we have to understand with climate change happening that we have had hotter years than ever before. And in fact, the last 9 years have been the hottest, and 2023 is the hottest recorded year in human history. How does that apply to artificial turf? Well, these are temperatures that Terry supplied us with this very week. You can see in the valley this week, it was 103 degrees. If you took a temperature gauge and put it on grass, you would see that in the shade, it's 92 degrees. In the sun, it's basically the same as the ambient temperature. The temperature of white rocks is 147. The temperature of asphalt is 155. And yes, there's our good old buddy artificial turf coming in at 165 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to actually burn skin. This is by no means an isolated example. There have been studies replete on this issue with data providing confirmation that if it's 90 degrees in an ambient temperature, it's 150 degrees on artificial turf. And so if you're trying to save water, what you end up doing is spending a lot more of your resources of water with artificial turf because you have to water it down to cool it down just so people can play on it. Not to mention the fact that this is an impermeable surface and we lose runoff, and I'll cover a little bit more of that in just a second. But let's talk about the toxicity of this. All of this stuff is plastic. It's a mix of multiple types of compounds of plastics. And I don't want to go into a lot of chemistry and data on this, but these PFAS, PFAS, this is essentially what we call the forever chemicals, which is just as creepy as it sounds. It means this builds up in your body, it accumulates, it bioaccumulates. So if you get exposure to this when you're 5 years old, that's still in your body when you're 60, and every bit of new exposure gets more that builds up in your body. And these things connect to all kinds of health concerns. Now, I want to be clear and I want to be fair in saying that artificial turf is not the only source of PFAS within our society. There are numerous other ones, but this is something that we don't have to use. And it is a significant source of all these PFASs. And that's even before you consider the fact that this is terrible for biodiversity. It doesn't save water, and it makes, more injuries because the athletes, the NCAA has documented some forms of knee injuries are like 3 times as common if you're playing on artificial turf. Lots and lots of reasons to not use this product. Okay, left turn. The glaciers in the Sierra Nevada have melted an average of 70% since the beginning of the 20th century. What does that mean? It means right now we are getting more water than we would normally get from precipitation. Because of all that extra heat, we're burning off the bank of water that exists in the mountains next to us. So this time right now, this moment in history is one of the most important times to actually capture that free water, because once it is gone forever, unless the climate radically changes and it gets much colder again, and then it rebuilds those glaciers up in the mountains. So why does that matter? It matters to Angelenos because Los Angeles County has the steepest terrain in the United States. Now, I don't mean it's the highest elevation. Certainly there's places with higher elevation. But if you consider the distance between the highest point and the lowest point, we're actually the steepest in the entire country. In 40 miles, we go from our mountain ranges, which are around 10,000 feet, to sea level. So that means that the water that is moving through the watershed in Los Angeles region, in the Los Angeles region, is moving faster than it moves in most places. It also means when we have rain events, precipitation events, we are getting rain moving very, very quickly into the water. And once that fresh water is gone, it's gone in the ocean. We can't reclaim it without going through desalination, which is a very energy intensive and very expensive process. So it is extremely important that we capture water when we have the opportunity. And as you can see in this overhead shot of Los Angeles, a lot of Los Angeles now is hardscape. It is concrete, it is roads. So when we do have open urban spaces, it is extremely important that those spaces be able to capture water to recharge our groundwater. Plastic carpet doesn't do that. Any kind of landscaping plants can do that. Grass as a playing field can also do that. Here's our average rainfall. Now, anybody who knows me and has known me for 10 minutes has gotten, preached to about the importance of our native plants and how important they are to biodiversity. Our native plants are particularly adapted to all kinds of climate variants in terms of precipitation. As you can see, our average is 15 inches a year in Los Angeles, but we almost never get 15 inches a year. We get as much as 35 and as little as 5, quite commonly. It's all over the place. Now, here's an important fact. The climate models that we have for the next 200 years say that the region where we live in Los Angeles County is actually going to get the same amount of precipitation, but it's going to get it in fewer and more extreme events. So it is more important than ever that we take advantage of being able to capture water when water is available to us. And our urban spaces are incredibly important right now as a lifeboat for biodiversity, for genetic biodiversity. This is because we have an opportunity in our spaces here to preserve what we have in terms of plants, in terms of animals, in terms of what is out there. Right now, we have many, many more forest fires happening in our wild spaces. This is because of us and because we're increasing the temperatures. We can't think of our urban spaces as, we do whatever we want here and out there is out there. So don't worry about the artificial turf. When we do have precious outdoor spaces, we need to take advantage of those. That means grass playing fields. That means when you have ornamental landscaping, you use native plants. You do things to capture water and preserve biodiversity. That's it for that. So that's your presentation. And that is why we, as Climate Reality Los Angeles, are a co-founder of this SoCal Stop Artificial Turf Task Force. And I, glossed over a lot of the issues because it was a short presentation, and also I wasted 10 minutes not being able to do the presentation. So there's that, and I apologize for that. But I'm going to now introduce my friend, my colleague, and you are real fortunate to have Terry Saucier with us here tonight. She is a chapter member. She is also a board member of the Tarzana Neighborhood Council. She is heavily involved in biodiversity and forestry issues in Tarzana. She's involved with the San Fernando Valley chapter of Climate Reality as well. And Terry, it's just a real pleasure to have you here. And thank you for coming tonight and being part of what we're doing.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for inviting me.
So what we're going to talk about a little bit is how you came upon the artificial turf issue. And then I want to talk about how your journey took place as is continuing as somebody who's involved in all of this, because I thought it was really insightful and important that we have Terry here tonight, because she's one of us and she's followed a path. Nobody declared Terry the world's expert on artificial turf, but there was a need for somebody to step up And Terry stepped up. She's not a scientist by trade. She works as just a regular person who cares about these things. And she's made the effort to get terribly informed on this issue. So Terry, tell us a little bit about how that journey took place for you and with respect to artificial turf.
Okay. Well, I think like many of us here, we were getting concerned about seeing artificial turf cropping up through the LA between our neighborhoods, schools, parks. And I think to me, it was very obvious that this is going to hurt wildlife, biodiversity. I have in my front yard the skunks, the raccoons, the birds, the hawks, everything. So to me, that was very upsetting when I see it. And then the school I was working at in Las Virgenes found out that the school district wanted to pull up grass at 6 schools and install artificial turf, including the elementary school that I was working at. And this was only one last little piece of natural surface at this school. Otherwise, it'd be blacktop, rubber, and old artificial turf. So I couldn't imagine, particularly for elementary school kids, how could you justify that? These are kids who are doing somersaults, playing soccer and falling, digging for earthworms, watching the ladybugs. And I couldn't think of putting one more artificial surface that'll be too hot. So then you'll be choosing between the blacktop at 140 and the artificial turf at 165 to play on. And so I was very upset, and the school district was purposely not telling parents, the teachers, the staff. And then, Charles, I attended one of the forum you had on artificial turf. And so I got to learn more about the PFAS and the toxicity. You had Dr. Kyla Bennett there speaking, and Dinah Zuckerman from Public Employees and Environmental Responsibility and National Center for Health Research. And as they were talking, I was taking notes, like I was copying their slides down, thinking, I cannot believe how bad this stuff is. Why is this allowed to be in our environment? Why are people putting it in their schools? So I then went back to the school and said, even though I worked there, I wrote a letter to the Board of Education, and asked them, and kind of like incorporate all the information I had learned, personalized it to the school in particular and the kids and the age of the kids, and asked them, why are you doing this? Please don't do this. These are things wrong with it. And they couldn't be bothered except to put me a reply was, I think, 2 sentences. It said, one, this will save us water. And it's not a petroleum product. We will use olive pits for infill, so therefore it's safe. And we find PFAS in everything. So I guess we weren't supposed to worry about it. So that's
let's explain what infill is in terms of the elements of artificial turf. Do you want to do that, or?
Sure. So the artificial turf has a number of different parts. It has the plastic grass blades, of course, that stick up. It has a backing. In some instances, it'll have a shock pad. These are all plastic. It's a petrochemical product. And then in order to make the grass blades stick up, they will put an infill on the carpet. And oftentimes they were using tire crumb rubber, which is highly, highly toxic in there. And so the school district, through the artificial turf company, was pretty much doing a little greenwashing there. They're trying to say, don't worry about the plastic blades, don't worry about the plastic backing and the microplastics. Just think about the little olive pits, and then you think it's safe. So that's kind of one of the techniques that they will use.
And so that infill kind of just holds it all together in terms of, it's kind of to pack it all together kind of a thing. And one of the things about that infill that I think most people don't realize is it has to be maintained. It has to be combed. It has to be replaced. It has to be cleaned, because when you put plastic carpet basically over soil, you sterilize the soil. You wipe out billions and billions of bacteria that naturally exist in soil. And so, one of the things I often talk about with people, this is when you have kids on a playing field, you're going to get all those gross things like blood and spit. I mean, how many times have we watched an athletic event and seen people spit? I mean, it constantly happens. Snot, all kinds of things that are happening from human beings. If that's on a grass playing field, as gross as all that sounds, there is bacteria there that breaks all that stuff down. But if you do it on a plastic carpet, no matter what the infill material is, you basically have to use soap and water and wash all that stuff out of there or leave it there. And, it is a constant maintenance issue for the infill. It's not something where you set it and forget it. And the artificial turf product only has a usable life of 8 to 10 years for athletic fields, 8 to 15 for low volume playing fields. It's not a lot of time. And so you're looking at replacing the entire thing in fairly short order relative to what most people might anticipate. So Terry, when they decided to bring it to the 6 schools, what did you do, and how did that lead you to the steps that were taken to start this coalition?
Right. So as I said, I sent an initial letter through the principal thinking I had to go through the chain of command. And then when I got this ridiculous reply and no one's name was attached to it, like they didn't take any responsibility for the reply, I wrote another letter, but this time I addressed it to the Board of Education. So I wanted to hear what they had to say. And they essentially sent me back the same reply, but a little bit neater. And they wanted me to stop looking into this. They didn't want me talking to the parents or the PTAs or talking to the teachers, that kind of thing. So I was actually a little bit more motivated to do something about it. So at that point, I reached out to the San Fernando Valley chapter for Climate Rally, since that is where I was on the leadership team. And I explained to them what was happening and how upset I was with the school. I can't believe this is happening. So they said they would support me. And then I reached out to Charles with the LA chapter and the Biodiversity Committee, and we quickly formed a coalition. And also we had reached out to actually David Eisenberg's here. He's with Sierra Club. He gave us a lot of information. He had been fighting fields in Glendale, and he put me in touch with Diane Wilkie, who is quite the expert on artificial turf and quite a powerhouse. He knows what's going on everywhere. And she dropped everything to write a 19-page letter for me and sent it to the school and to help us along. So from there, our 2 organizations, we created an online petition. That way we had all the facts in there. It's like our fact sheet that we could share with the parents, with the idea that they could then share it with others, and we could send it to teachers. It would kind of have a life of its own. We wrote letters to the media. Kathy Schaefer had an article in the Acorn, which I thought was great because it was in the whole district where the schools were. We organized a letter writing campaign, which was sent to the school board, the PTAs, and other organizations like the fundraising organizations. And we did that by reaching out to local environmental other organizations like the Sierra Club, like David Heisenberg sent a letter. Climate Action California sent a letter through Kathy Schaefer, LA Waterkeeper, and Heal the Bay. Sorry, dogs. And of course, Charles, you wrote a letter, and then Safe Healthy Playing Fields also wrote a letter.
So did you mention Los Angeles Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance? So
no, because they weren't part of the coalition yet.
They weren't part of the first conversation, but they've been dealing with this issue and looking at this issue for a long time as well. And so when the time came, they joined us as well. We have some members from that coalition in this meeting as well, and we greatly appreciate having them involved. I want to throw out just a credit to Diane Welke also, that 2 of the slides that I did in my embarrassingly silly presentation, the 2 on PFAS are from Diane's presentation. So I want to acknowledge that, and she offered to share that with us. So thank you, Diane, for that. And I have to tell you, I have read a lot about artificial turf. I know a lot more than the average person, and I know this much compared to Diane. She knows more about this issue in terms of the history of it, in terms of the science of it, in terms of a broad breadth of information on the topic. She knows more than any person I've met. And so, Diane, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for being part of our coalition and our work. And thank you for mentoring Terry and our organization and helping us as well, because that's been a huge part of what we've been doing as well. So, Terry, just to continue, for the sake of the people who haven't heard this story before, what is the status today with respect to those fields in Las Virgenes?
Right. So they actually the project was put on hold. I hope that we had some influence over that, but they didn't install the fields that summer like they were going to, even though I was imagining myself chaining myself to the gates to keep them from the bulldozers coming in. But they were put on hold. I do know some construction projects are starting again. So this is now a year later. So I'm going to start looking into that as well. Yeah, so that's where that is. They put it on hold.
So you're modest in this, but I think you created enough of a stink that you need to take a win on this. You need to declare it. It still might go forward. This is not, these things are never won forever, but I want to just have everybody in this room understand that Terry kept refusing to take no for an answer. And sometimes that's what we have to do as advocates. Doesn't mean you have to be rude, doesn't mean you have to, be mean to people, but you just basically, when you know you're right and you're on the right side of stuff, you just have to keep coming. Doesn't mean you're always going to win. Sometimes people will find ways to eliminate you from the conversation. But in this particular case, I think and what often happens in the case of schools and municipalities approving artificial turf is they get a really good sales pitch. Somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm going to save you money. You're going to be applauded by all your stakeholders because this is good for the environment. And, this is totally going to work out for you. And then that person signs a contract, or those people sign a contract. And unfortunately, sometimes in our world of politics, people, once they've committed to a bad decision, even if they realize it's a bad decision, they kind of dig in rather than being open to revisiting that bad decision. And that's definitely what happened to Terry in this particular case. And those of us who had helped her and supported her through that process, we witnessed that kind of phenomenon. And I think that where we are today is that they've tabled it because of the stink that was raised, and they might try to come back to it if the stink goes away. So we have to keep stink on the issue for them. But that's kind of what we have to do as advocates a lot of times. And so I want to thank you on behalf of the people of our chapter, the people of Los Angeles, the people of the Las Virgenes School District, for the tremendous leadership you did on this, Terry, because I know that so often when you have things like this, there has to be one person that kind of holds the thing together. And I think in this particular issue, you were that person and you made the difference, and lots of other people helped. And I don't want to in any way downplay that. But I personally don't think that decision to put this on indefinite hold would have happened were it not for you. And that's why I want you to be an inspiration to everybody here in this meeting tonight, that, you're just a person who cares about the environment, is involved in Climate Reality Project, and you stepped up. And now we're heavily involved in this. And so today, as our coalition has grown, we started with our coalition going around and meeting with council district offices in Los Angeles, asking them to support a ban on artificial turf. We wrote some language for them. We did a lot of discussion, talked about the issues. We got a mostly receptive reaction in most of the offices that with whom we met. And today, Council District 3, Bob Blumenfield's district, he is the Los Angeles City Council member from that particular area. His staff have introduced Council File 24-06-02 that if somebody wants to do me a real solid, put the link to that in the chat if anybody wants to see it. But if you can't find it, it's on our website. And that is a motion that is now being considered by Los Angeles City Council. The motion is not to ban artificial turf. It's kind of a first step. It has passed 2 committees. It is next going to face a vote for the entirety of City Council, probably within the next month, maybe on the sooner side of that. And that motion is essentially to put the onus on the the divisions of the City of Los Angeles that deal with artificial turf to write an evaluation of it and write about the impacts of it. And it's all being done with the idea of essentially justifying a regulation and ordinance that would either ban artificial turf, put a moratorium on it, or hopefully at least those things, and possibly provide some mechanisms to give people some extra funding and incentives to remove installations that are already there when they each reach end of life. Terry, talk about that process that you went through, and how I'm interested in you personally as an advocate. I mean, you kind of stepped up and you're suddenly in the big league. Talk about that process in terms of how you went from, stepping up on this issue to now being the person that city council member staff are calling and asking for your opinion, and that process that you've gone through.
Well, I want to say too, though, it's the executive committee for our task force, right? We now call an executive committee. And I think that with all of our networking, the work that we've done prior, that's really helped us get a foot in the door and get people to talk to us. And the executive committee is, of course, Charles, Andy Hatala, Lisa Hart, Kathy Schaefer. We have new committee members, Valeria's here, Aurora, and then we have like our expert panel, and we have others that are supporting our efforts. So it's not a one-man or one-person show, I should say. It's all of us. I would just say that like Kathy Schaefer, she used her expertise as a legislative person for Climate Reality. So she would call all the council members. She would set up all the dates for our meetings and then find out if we could all meet. And we would go there. We would do our whole thing about, like you mentioned, Charles talked about artificial turf and why it's bad, and asked them to write a motion. And then we got a call. Oh, and Lisa Hart, NCSA, once SB 676 passed, which allows us to ban artificial turf. LA and CSA took a vote to ban it. So join our coalitions. Now we're officially a coalition of at least 3. And where's I going to go with that? So we got a call they told us we should talk to David Harone. We called David Harone, as Charles mentioned, and he drafted this motion. It went to the Energy Environment Committee once it was introduced. And then we worked with David to have edits. Charles, you did a great job with that, right? You wrote a response to David on the edits that we would like to see in the motion. And we met with David, and he incorporated some of those ideas. And that's what went to it was introduced, that went to the Energy Environment Committee, and that got voted on. And we worked really hard. I would say we did an urgent email to all our supporters, and our supporters shared with other people. We reached out to more than 100 different people and organizations, asking them to support that motion before it was voted on in the Energy Environment Committee. And more than 75 comments were submitted in support of the motion. And that took all of us working on that. And our contacts were Kathy getting the email and the list together. And we also asked people to show up there if they could at City Hall. And that day at City Hall was myself, Lisa Hart, Diane Wilkie, and Nikki Alvarado. And it was kind of wonderful to be able to share comments and then get to see it being approved, passing.
And thank you for doing that, Terry. I appreciate you being gracious and pointing out that this was a group effort. There are a lot of people in this room tonight who have been heavily involved in that. You mentioned Lisa. Andy Schrader is here tonight. He offered some expertise behind the scenes and was extremely inspirational and helping and encouraging us. Has definitely been through the city process many times. Lots of people in that core group have brought their own unique skill to it. But I'm not going to let you get away from the question, because you become the face of the movement, and we're certainly underscoring that tonight, because there's always somebody who is. And I'm just curious about how you feel about this process to now be suddenly kind of exposed this way.
That's why we keep referring to the group.
All right.
That's obvious.
Okay. All right.
I'm happy to do everything I can. I'm happy to try to take a lead. I was just, asked me to do this, and I was thinking, gosh, I'm going to go back to some of my original notes in the very beginning, where I came up like a target list of everyone we should talk to. And I'm thinking, wow, we hit a lot of the people we wanted to talk to. We did a lot of what we wanted to accomplish. And then I can see some things we still need to do. So I'm just proud of what we've accomplished so far. And I'm hopeful for what's going to come next. And the fact we need to get this motion passed. I know some of you are like, oh, it'll pass for sure. I worry. So I want to make sure this motion passes. And we have a list of things that we're still going to do. So
well, there's a lot to do. This is first steps in many ways. I mean, if this motion passes, we haven't really accomplished anything other than getting the conversation going. And then we would have to advocate and be very persistent in making sure that these divisions of the city provide these reports, and that the reports are science-based, and that there is transparency in that process. All of this stuff is stuff that, you, I, and other people in the coalition, our chapter, and anybody who's listening who wants to be part of this, please jump into it. Email me, email Terry. We are excited to have you as part of this conversation. We need to follow through with that, and then hopefully get a motion to ban new installations of artificial turf as a part of that. And, we don't just focus on Los Angeles and Climate Reality Project. So we want this to be a groundswell, of energy that then spreads throughout the state. And so ideally, because it is now legal to do something like this anywhere in the state, we want to create a best practices pattern, for other areas. We will be the largest municipality to have ever banned artificial turf if we are successful in this. And so it's a big deal. And it is, it's important that we understand that a lot of people installed artificial turf because they were told, hey, this is good, it saves water, this is good for you. And we're not shaming on those people. We get it. We understand that you made a choice that was based on bad information you were given. The good news is you were going to have to replace it within 15 years anyway, because it just doesn't last that long. And so that's another reason that why we're going to be working to get incentives for people to reinstall, sustainable landscaping, be it a grass playing field or native plants, things along those lines that do all the things that we need to do for biodiversity. And I always like to throw in, and you put in the native plants, you get butterflies to boot. So that's a bonus that no artificial turf ever gave anyone.
Charles, one
Yeah,
thing.
please.
So you say, as the leader, so one of the things I do is I come up with lists. I'm annoying asking people if they want to participate. So I'm going to do that. And one is we are going to meet with council members still to make sure they know they need to support this motion. So if you want to meet with your council member, if you want to be a part of that, it's wonderful if we have constituents with us. So Charles, I don't know how you want to do that. People put their name in the chat, follow up later, say I am interested in meeting with council.
You can put your name in the chat. You can contact Climate Reality Project Los Angeles through our chapter website. Either one of those ways will get you to. And Terry, I'm going to wrap my part of this up and open it up to questions people might have for you about your journey and or about artificial turf, which we'll do our best to answer given the coalition we have here. I think we could answer any question between you, me, Lisa, Diane, and Andy, all the people that we have in the call tonight. The question I always ask everybody when I'm wrapping up the interview is, what did you do when you've had one of those days or one of those weeks or one of those years when you just are not having success in something that is really important that you've invested a huge amount of time and energy in, when basically you've just been told no so many times that you just are having trouble reinvigorating yourself and getting to a point where you can keep up the good fight? What do you do when those days happen and it feels like you don't know how you're going to keep going?
I go outside. I go outside in the backyard where the birds are.
And you have artificial turf in your backyard?
Thank God, no, there's no way. No, I have plenty of native plants. I have lots of birds. So that's what rejuvenates me, to be out in nature.
Okay, everybody, let's have some questions for Terry. Again, a little bit different than we've done our format in the past, but she's one of us. And so ask about artificial turf, ask about Terry and how she, came to this point of being in this situation. Whatever you guys want to ask, everything's fair game. Lisa Hart.
I'm kind of cheating because I'd love to pass the baton, if that's the right word, to Tristan Marler of LA San and give her the floor if that's okay, because she's one of the she's our liaison, the LA Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance's liaison, and she's one of the departments that's gonna give a report back through the motion, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Tristan, would you like to say a few words? I want to preface this by saying sanitation has been the most favorable to this kind of messaging, I think, of any department out there, because they understand the biodiversity issue very, very well and are studying that and providing documentation on that. Tristan, are you available? Would you like to comment?
Yeah, I'd be happy to say a few words. Well, first of all, Terry, it's really nice to see you on camera. I know I'm not on camera, so I apologize for that. I'm in my jammies, so I'm being completely honest, preparing for my day off tomorrow because that just got changed. But yeah, I was trying to be active in the chat. I know Isabel had asked for the motion link. I put that there. But also LA San, our primary committee, as you guys know, is energy and environment. So as someone that is on the ledge team for external affairs, we're always up to date with that. So I'm definitely happy to just give you guys a heads up when we see it going to council, because that will definitely be something that's likely discussed that we can share with you. But also in terms of the work that we're doing on this report back, so our chief technical officer, I want to say that's his title. It's a very technical title. He's very, very smart. He has a PhD. His name's Moss. But he's working with LADWP, and we're discussing the all the harm that PFAS has in it, right? So that's what we're discussing. So we are very supportive of this ban. And yeah, it's great to be here. I know that I've connected with Charles and different things too. I know he's on the Greenway project. I've been to events. Aurora has invited me for or two for Pico Union Neighborhood Council and stuff. And so to see you guys as well, like having your own different roles outside of this meeting is really great to see kind of how everybody connects on similar issues that are really important for climate change. And we do also have our sustainability division. I'm sure Lisa's met with Doug, but we focus more on like biodiversity there. But to be honest with you, I've been with LA Sand for like 6 months, so I'm still learning all the time. And we touch so many different issues that were mentioned today. So if you guys ever need anything, I'll just drop my chat information or I'll drop my information in the chat, and you're welcome to reach out. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely supportive of this motion. We'd like to see go forward as well.
Kristen, thank you for being here tonight. That means a lot and it says a lot. We really appreciate it. Pat, you're up.
Oh, no. Hi, everyone. Just a couple things. Thank you, Terry. This is amazing. I know my colleague from San Fernando Valley Audubon was Muriel was here for at least a while. A couple things. I know there is a LA Parks Commission meeting in the Balboa Sports Center this coming Thursday. If you're aware of any issues on the agenda regarding artificial turf, please let me know. Otherwise, I will read through all the documents for the thing. I have some other issues that I will be going there for. I do expect San Fernando Valley Audubon to take this up as a cause. We start meeting again in September. Our conservation committee will be meeting this summer. I'm the co-chair of that. Just really thank you for getting a hold of this. This stuff is really evil. And I will tell you just the story. I was walking over in the Balboa Sports Center, and I saw almost 100 Western meadowlarks on a grass soccer field. You will never see anything like that on artificial turf. It's dead.
Thank you, Pat.
That
You're
bird
welcome.
has my
Thank
favorite
you for
song,
what you do.
Bird. So thank you, Pat. I appreciate that. Andy.
Hey, Terry, thanks as always for presenting. I wanted to ask a question so that you could address what I think is potential greenwashing that will occur and that I want people on this call and others to be aware of. Are there any types of turf made from bioplastic or what would be considered safer or more sustainable versions that don't have the traditional plastic that is a problem? I just want people to know if there are alternatives in case they hear of those, because I think that that will be a norm and that greenwashing will be prevalent for this particular product.
The answer is no. I just saw Diane Wilkie talking with a Bob who's working with West Hollywood. West Hollywood, they want to remove wood chips at a dog park and put artificial down for dog to poop and pee on, I guess, in a dog park. That makes no sense. But anyway, I do know that was brought up. So no, there is no biodegradable plastic, or even if they're trying to put corn oil or something in there, the fact is it's still plastic and it still will have PFAS. And they do a lot of greenwashing. And I know Dan just saw a document, which I need to decipher, but they will confuse people by saying it doesn't have this PFAS when it actually has other PFAS, because there's like 16,000 different kinds of PFAS. So you could say we don't have these 34, but we have these other ones. Or they might mess with the amount of parts per trillion, parts per million, billion. So they're always finding ways around to be misleading. All artificial turf has PFAS. They haven't figured out how to get it out yet. And it also has all these other contaminants. So even if we didn't have PFAS, it has other things that we need to be concerned about.
You know, the Synthetic Turf Council, which is one of the lobbyist groups that for the artificial turf industry, is already in the process of lobbying the city council members on the motion that we've been discussing. And in a letter they recently submitted to Councilmember Yaroslavsky, they wrote that their members do not introduce any intentional PFAS into artificial turf. That's the language they've chosen to use. And I wrote an op-ed that's going to be upcoming in the LA Times, so look out for that one. It should be the next week or two if we don't have another presidential changeover in terms of news coverage, because I guess that pushed me back a little bit. But I refer to that in there, and I talk about how, you know, the tobacco industry doesn't intentionally add carcinogens to cigarettes. I mean, it's part of the core product. So PFAS is part of the core product of those multiple types of plastic. Of course, they don't intentionally add any PFAS on top of that. And so you're right on target there, Andy, with respect to the fact that they are going to be very selective in language to try to dissuade people from thinking, you know, bad things about the product.
Thank you.
Jill, you're up. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. One last
Oh, go
thing.
ahead,
Sorry,
Andy.
really quickly. One last thing, just so everyone knows, when it is bioplastic, this is irregardless of PFAS and other chemicals. It also cannot go anywhere other than a landfill. We don't have the capacity to break down biodegradable products. The technology just doesn't exist yet. So if you hear that it's compostable in any capacity, that is a lie. That's not even addressing the PFAS component. So I just wanted that to be out there too.
Absolutely true. And the product is never recycled. Every bit of artificial turf that has ever existed has either been warehoused in rolls that just sit there like spent nuclear fuel rods waiting for eternity, or it has been shredded up and burned, which creates all kinds of other pollution problems. It is never, and Diane's got her hand up. She knows more about this than I do, so we'll get to her in a second. But Jill, you're up next.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been really informative. I really appreciate all the knowledge I have gleaned from all of you. We do have some artificial turf in our backyard and a little bit in the front. And I think one of my questions was just touched on, and that was as we progress and we will want to get rid of it, who's going to pick it up? That was one question. And then you alluded, I think, also to that there may be some rebates coming down the road to get rid of it. I mean, I think at the time we put it in, we got a rebate for putting it in and taking out the grass and saving the water. So I would love to know the timing of it to have an incentive, a financial incentive to help get rid of it and learn how to dispose of it. And I also wondered if you could address what you think is best for pets. We have 2 dogs right now, and grass that we had in our backyard never survived in our backyard. And that was one of the reasons we ended up going with the artificial turf. And it's been a good solution for our dogs. I mean, they've not had any health issues or anything, but from what I've learned, you know, we're going to get rid of it. But my question would be, who do we speak to about, you know, what to put in? We had a professional landscaper just 2 years ago who actually did a bunch of work with the local native, like desert plantings and things like that. And we got a rebate from DWP, but he did put in a little bit of artificial turf too. So I'm just wondering, how do you know? Do you guys have resources for us who could guide us when we replace it?
Terry, let me answer the incentives thing, because I brought that up, and I want to be 100% clear. No such incentive exists right now.
I understood that. Yeah.
You can no longer receive incentives to install artificial turf. That is progressed to that fact. but there are no incentives to remove artificial turf, financial incentives right now. I was simply saying that as a coalition, I think we would love to see, as part of any kind of banning of artificial turf, that there would then be incentives to replace it the same way we incentivize replacing water-hungry lawns with more sustainable native plants and things like that that don't use those resources. So that is purely wishful thinking and the work that we're doing.
Charles,
But,
I just want to
you wanna
mention,
answer the rest of the
I'm
question?
sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about just the amendment. I'll let you talk about the native plants. You'll do much
Yeah.
better at that. But as far as the incentive, it is in the amended motion. It is asking LADWP to figure out how it can do incentives and rebates to help people
discuss
get
it, yeah,
rid
yeah,
of the
yeah.
artificial turf. So it's actually written in the motion if it were to pass.
Yeah, you're right. And that's a very good point. Yeah. And you also asked
I asked about how, like, if we were to get rid of it tomorrow, where would it go? Who would pick it up? Who would take it?
it
And
would go to, well, Tristan might know more of the actual chain of command with respect to sanitation, but in Los Angeles, it is most apt to just go to the landfill. And that's my understanding of what happens to it. There's no particular place for it, and the landfill is problematic because it can leach chemicals there, as a lot of things we put in the landfill can do that, which is why we line the landfills, and that's a whole other conversation. But
so
Let
you
me
would
just
have to
chime
call
in,
for
though.
like a special pickup for it
No, but-
because it's
yeah,
a
but-
hazardous waste?
No, but Jill, you're in the city of LA, it sounds like,
I'm
right?
in the Palisades.
So yeah, they'll pick it up. I mean, I mean, if it's too big for your bin, you can call, but they'll pick it up.
yeah,
Okay,
you can do a bulk item pickup for that.
okay.
Exactly.
And my other question was, if you guys have resources of people that you would recommend, to recommend alternatives to that, and that would be safe for pets.
We do. I'm going to tell you a couple right now because I'm a certified native plant landscaper myself.
Okay,
And there is a plant called Lippia, or Phylla nodiflora is the scientific name. It also has several other common names, but Lippia is the most prominent common name.
okay,
And that is a native ground cover that only gets about 2 inches high. And you couldn't do an NFL game on it, but it will take light traffic for your kids to run around or your pets to run around, and it will completely cover an area. So if you need a lawn type substitute that is native, that uses low water, that is, promotes biodiversity, it's a great grass, or not a grass, but it's a great plant. There are some other plants that we could talk about in depth. You can contact me directly,
okay.
or come to one of our biodiversity meetings if you would be interested in that. There are also at least 3 other people in the room I could see who know about this. So we have the resources and I'll connect you to them. I see
Great.
Valeria chomping at the bit on this because she knows these answers too.
Okay.
But there are good solutions out there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Valeria, you're up.
My question is actually with the sports field, how are coaches or like the public, sports players, are they being brought in to the coalition, and are we forming some sort of, I would imagine that the cities would be on notice. Is that something that's part of this? Because of all the injuries that are being, that are exacerbated from playing on sports fields. I know that the NFL, the Women's Soccer League, a lot of these organizations are banning or stopping playing on Astro fields. So is that something that the city, being fully aware of, might be hesitant and reluctant, because those are lawsuits just waiting to happen? Anybody?
No, you're
Sorry,
right.
that just kind of came up.
No, you're right. It was one of the things on our list. We wanted to reach out to sports teams and things like that. And I think that was on my list, actually. And my daughter played competitive soccer. She played soccer from the time she was 4 until she was 10. And I managed a club soccer team for 3 years. And I talked to someone, I said, she played state cup. We had multiple teams and, like 30 fields, and not once in that whole time do we ever have to play an artificial turf field. So they like to say that you have 24/7 play, or to have competitive play, and there's so many kids who want to play. We did not once have to play on artificial turf. There are alternatives that are safer. Diane's had her hand up for a while too, Charles.
Yeah, Diane, I'm also going to ask you to correct me on anything I said tonight that you think I was just wrong on, because that's certainly possible. And we would love your perspective on all of it. Thank you for being here.
No, I do think that it is the intention of the legislative aides to be working with and reaching out to the school district for one, as well as obviously rec and parks. I did want to make a comment about the water savings. 989 gallons per meter squared of artificial turf. That's how much water is required to manufacture 1 square meter of plastic carpet. It is not water saving. I would be very concerned with old plastic turf that you have that your dogs are on. The more those blades and the backing breaks down, the more chemicals that can be released. Excuse me. Dogs lick their paws. They have shorter lifespans, faster metabolisms. They're more likely to have health impacts earlier on than humans would. With humans, there can be a long latency period to develop disease and or cancers. So I would be aware of that. Last I checked, I could not find anybody in San Diego County, and this was a couple of years ago, any of the landfills that would take synthetic turf. The closest I found was in Long Beach. So I would check to see, and I do know that one of the hired guns, one of the lobbyists for the Synthetic Turf Council just last month, 2 days, I think, before we all spoke in LA, had testified before, I think it was the Environmental Committee, because it was Senator Ben Allen again, had testified that the largest carpet recycler in Los Angeles cannot take synthetic turf. We know of 4 faux recyclers that are chopping it up, claiming that they're using the chopped up materials to make downgraded plastic materials. You need to know that less than 1% of these downgraded materials have recycled materials. It requires additional virgin plastic and additional PFAS and other chemicals to manufacture these things. It also renders them completely unrecyclable again. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we now have 8 states that have synthetic turf bills. Most of them are problematic in that they're using that same wording, intentionally added. And of course, the Synthetic Turf Council is on this bandwagon. They're denying that they're using intentionally added PFAS. We know it's in there. We know that right now the science is such that we can test for about 100 different PFAS. The most cost-effective way to test, if you have a sample that you want to have tested, would be to do a total organic fluorine with an accelerated aging process. That you just need to know the initials SPLP. Excuse me. The closest place that I know of in the state is probably in the Sacramento or the East Bay area of San Francisco, Eurofins, and you would look for their consumer product division where they do consumer product testing. It costs around $1,000 for the total organic fluorine, but that is the kind of the gold standard to tell you if there is any kind of PFAS in there. The accelerating the aging process artificially will tell you what's going to come off over time, because a lot of these chemicals will degrade into their salts and into the precursors of PFAS. So it's not enough to, like the case that Terry was talking about with Hart Park. I found bogus testing that was done for Forever Lawn, a very unfortunate name, Canine Turf, which is manufactured at the DuPont factory in Dalton, Georgia, where most of this plastic carpet is made. It's bogus results. I ran them by Kristen Mello. I have not heard back from Jeff Gerhardt and Kyla. Kyla's got her hands full with yet another EPA lawsuit. Excuse me. But I had her break it down so that I could pass it on to Bob. Also found their document that where they kind of cover their whats by claiming that we can't promise that stuff won't come off at some point. It's their way of kind of trying to protect themselves. But in the meantime, this is the face they're putting out to the public when they're trying to sell their product. So you should never trust somebody who's trying to tell you something to provide you with independent third-party testing results. It's just not going to happen. And it's something that we know we need to be filing more complaints with the FTC, with the Office of the Attorney General, even people who are making these claims. For example, our friend who showed up at the LA meeting and spoke right behind me saying, we've already removed PFAS from our products. Even these people who are making these false claims, ideally, in a perfect world, should all be reported to the Office of the Attorney General as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Diane. And if nothing else, you got from Diane that this is a really, really complicated issue when you get into it in terms of the number of efforts that have been done to mislead people and keep things going. But, just to kind of tie a bow on this, artificial turf has definite health problems associated with injuries, associated with the chemicals that leach into our water systems. Artificial turf doesn't save water the way it's supposed to. Artificial turf contributes to the heat island effect within our cities. And artificial turf is the worst possible thing you can do when we're in a biodiversity crisis where we're constantly losing species by covering the earth with plastic carpet. It's been a lot of people have been unfortunately sold a bill of goods on it, and it's our job to address it and get the right information out there for people. So Terry, thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this. You rocked it. We all appreciate the work you're doing. We appreciate the fact that you've been so willing to spend your time on this issue, working for our community, working for everybody, on this issue. And so thank you for agreeing to be part of this interview as well. I appreciate it. I wanted to give people a perspective on just, one of us who really stepped up. And sometimes we fall in love with like the big famous people in the movement, and those people are cool to hear from, but I want to hear from the people at the very start. Maybe Terry's going to be, really, really famous in the environmental movement in a few years. You never know, kind of a
Well,
thing.
thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you, Charles. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.